Hey guys, EJ here with the Back Porch Antiques, and I want to touch base just a little bit on something we hadn't really talked about yet in our video sessions, I guess, on YouTube. But we've talked about pure antiques, that which is over 100 years old, especially 19th century furniture. We've talked on that pretty good. We've hit on case knives, Pyrex, Tennessee license plates, lots of things. But what we haven't hit on much is more modern collectibles, and I would say modern antique, but I guess that's or modern vintage, more of an oxymoron. But there's a period there that's really starting to come on from like early 70s to early 90s, which is not really considered vintage or antique, yet it's becoming really collectible for the same reasons a lot of the things that we've previously discussed have been collectible. And that reason in and of itself is because that every piece is a memory. And I want to highlight a little bit of those things that are in our shop right now. And I want to start with these trucker hats. Now, we've got a good selection here at the Back Porch Antiques of old trucker hats. And they were a style of advertising back in the 70s and 80s. And everybody wore and loved the old trucker hats. And they've since become quite collectible. And it's local history. It's a kind of cultural history. And you can see that particular thing here in these type hats. Another type thing that is the post-vintage era, or more modern vintage, if you will, is old lunch boxes and thermoses, or thermos. I'm not really sure what the plural of thermos is, but these have become really popular. As you can see, this is Mork and Mindy. There is a major collectorship of these, and they are more valuable if you find them with the matching thermos. Now, at the Back Porch Antiques, we have several options of these here at the Back Porch Antiques. There's a Mork and Mindy. That's How the West Was Won. That's more early 70s. Here's kind of a space theme from that early to mid 60s. I really like that. That's actually depicting John Glenn and his launch. A lot of history said right there on that particular piece. So those are pretty cool. And it's just a good way that a lot of people remember the lunch boxes that they had when they were younger, and the ones maybe they couldn't afford or they couldn't have, and they maybe want to collect those at a later point in life. That's really how a lot of collections get started, is because people want to acquire what they couldn't have when they were younger. Leastwise, that's the case with me on certain things like old cars, for example. So here is a crazy market. Now, McDonald's and Pepsi and Burger King and lots of places like that in the mid-80s gave away these, what we call character glasses. This one is Wile E. Coyote. As you can see, it's got the Pepsi company logo on it there. And it is pretty cool. Lots of different type characters, from Looney Tunes to Peanuts to Charlie Brown, which I guess is technically Peanuts, are all depicted in these particular, like, see, there's Tweety and Porky Pig. And they have become quite the collectorship as well. People want to get one of each and complete the collection. And those are, like I said, mid-80s, but they're very, very collectible still yet in the vintage market. Here are a couple more examples of things that are fairly new, but still very collectible. You've heard me talk on, if you've been following us very long, I did a video on case knives. Well, there are some pretty valuable case knives that are collectible in the 80s and 90s. This particular piece is not extremely valuable, and it's not a case knife, but it is a Browning USA knife from the early 80s. And a lot of people like these good USA-made users, what we call users. It's not something that's so valuable that you'd be afraid to use it, but it is something that could be, it's collectible and you could be proud of it, but yet you're not afraid to use it. So that's a good market right there in stuff that's pretty valuable in the 70s and 80s. Now, this is something that has spanned the test of time. The good old-fashioned yo-yo. I could do a whole video on the yo-yo, and I'll bet you that anybody that watches these videos has somehow been impacted or involved with the hobby of yo-yoing at some point. Even up into the 90s, back into the 70s. It was a big deal back into the 70s. A big name of those is Duncan. This is the Duncan Butterfly. If you know anything about yo-yoing, you know the Duncan Butterfly. And there were several different styles. The more valuable ones actually had ball bearings in them. You could do all kinds of tricks, you know, walking the dog and the kid in the cradle and things like that. And they were pretty neat, but they're very collectible, believe it or not. A good old Duncan Butterfly of, you know, a certain make or a certain style could be worth a couple $100. So there's value, and there's a good collector market in things that aren't extremely old. So you've heard me talk about Pyrex and how collectible Pyrex is, and I guess technically it would fit into this category. In its later years, it was more of that early 70s to late 80s style, but in earlier than that, it was more of a mid-century modern style, and Tupperware falls into that same category. And believe it or not, there are a lot of Tupperware collectors out there, and there are a lot of different styles and offerings of Tupperware. Tupperware to me, for always, it seemed like what you put leftovers in, but it has become quite collectible. And we have several offerings here at the Back Porch Antiques. Here is a set of 4 of canisters, or stacking sets, if you will. That's a pretty desirable pattern. It's also collectible because it's something that's not extremely expensive, but it can be kind of hard to acquire. So there's there's a challenge to it. Over here also, some more examples of the collector glasses in this particular booth. You remember Foghorn Leghorn, you know, what is it that he said? I'm a chicken hawk. And quite the controversial one there, Elmer Fudd carrying a shotgun. And you got Yosemite Sam. And those are pretty cool pieces, but they're very collectible, even though they're pretty old. Here's another example. This would be kind of in the earlier age of our theme today, but the old Fisher-Price toys. And they were 70s, mid 70s to early 80s. They've become quite collectible. So that's kind of an example of the fact that it doesn't have to be 250, 300 years old to be a highly sought after collectible. And we really range from late 1800s. We have stuff even all the way back into the 18th century, late 1700s. Collectibles such as that. If you go into Indian artifacts, they will go back several hundred years old. And those are very collectible, but also we have things that are 15, 20, 30, 40 years old that are also very highly collectible. It's just a wonderful, a wonderful array of personalities who collect different sorts of things. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on just a little bit. If by chance you happen to have a rare character glass, or maybe a trucker hat that you really like and you'd like to show that off, I'd love to see that and interact with you all just a little bit in that manner. But anyway, give us a like and a shout out, and we'd sure appreciate it. I'll catch you later.